Hello YouTube, Spec Ops Delta here with a brand new Battlefield Bad Company 2 video. I am playing on Arica Harbor Conquest. I'm playing as an assault with the XM8 prototype, M9 pistol, 40mm grenade, and lightweight and magnum ammo. I don't have a third specialization because there are no vehicles in this level. And yes, as you can tell, this is in HD on my brand new rig that I got over this weekend. So I know a lot of you were asking how that went, what happened. Some of you who follow me on Twitter know that I had a few problems setting it up, so I'm just going to use this video and sort of talk about what my setup is, what sort of problems I had, and then finish it off by talking over this gameplay a bit, because there are some things that I wanted to cover tactically. So to start things off, I will just run through my specs of this computer. I put it in the comments on my latest video, but for those of you who didn't see it, I can just go through it now. I have an Asus M4A89 motherboard that is USB 3.0 and SATA 6 gig compliant. I got the AMD Phenom 2 X6, so it's a 6-core processor. My video card is the Gigabyte HD 6850, and I use that to record onto a external 1TB SATA drive. And I'm running 8 GB of G.Skill RAM, all inside a CoolerMaster HAF 912 case with a couple 200mm fans, one on the front and one on the top. And for those of you who didn't see, I did post a couple pictures on my Twitter account, so if you just want to go see it, then feel free. And so talking about the problems I had it shipped, let's see, it arrived Friday, and I had it shipped to my buddy's house because I live in an apartment complex and I was at work, and I didn't want the delivery man to leave it either on the porch, which would be horrible, or to say, you weren't home, we'll try and deliver it the next day, which would also be horrible. So I went to my buddy's house after work and we started, actually I didn't go after work, I went when my wife went to work, so I went around midnight, and we set it up, and we tried to get it all ready. We decided to actually, I was going to do RAID 5, which for those of you who don't know is, it uses a parity drive to sort of give backup while giving some semblance of speed, but we realized we had an extra drive so that we could do RAID 10, which takes out the parity drive and basically stripes and mirrors the data. For those of you, it's basically RAID 0 twice. I won't get into it too much, but it would boost performance by quite a large margin, so I decided to do that. And the install went great. Everything went well, and I installed Battlefield, I think third after Skype and Firefox, and jumped into a game, and it was great. I was able to play on high settings at about 100, sometimes even 120 frames per second, and while I was recording I can get a solid 60. However, after I played, I wanted to install Ubuntu Linux because that's mainly what I use. And my old computer, I had one drive for Windows 7 and one drive for Ubuntu Linux. And I wanted that same functionality because I don't always like to be in Windows, as a lot of you know. Windows is pretty much only used for me when I game. So when I went to install Ubuntu, it didn't recognize the RAID basically. And I think I don't exactly know to be honest, but it somehow wrote to the RAID so that when I went to install Linux afterwards, I could not boot back into Windows because the RAID was somehow corrupted. And so I spent several hours, probably 3 or 4 hours, trying to rebuild it from the BIOS RAID controller, which isn't that great honestly, and it did not work. I ended up testing a theory that I found online that supposedly worked for people that said just delete the RAID configuration, build a new one with the same specs, and it should rebuild itself automatically since everything would stay the same. But that was not the case, so I had to restart from scratch, rebuild the RAID, reinstall Windows 7 and all of that, and I believe I don't believe we tried installing Linux like that again. Actually, yes, we did. We tried to install it the same way again, and for some reason the drive went critical, which means that one hard drive was not completely synced up to the RAID. And when that happened, I was away. I think I had to sleep because I think it was 7, 8 in the morning, and we've been up all night trying to fix this, pulling our hair out, etc. So we tried to install Ubuntu again, and it did not work. So I had to reinstall Windows, rebuild the RAID, and what we decided to do was, instead of installing Linux on a separate drive, we would install it through Windows. That way Windows sees and knows the RAID exists and would just tell that to Linux rather than try and trust Linux to figure it out, which it seemed that it couldn't, unfortunately. So once we did that, it loaded fine. The Windows bootloader actually took care of loading Linux, which we did. So we installed it and used the Windows bootloader, got into Linux, but what it did is, after we went through the Windows bootloader, it loaded grub, which, for those of you who don't know, is Windows bootloader except for Linux. And that must have somehow changed the master boot record for the Windows RAID, because it broke the RAID again. So we were able to boot into Windows this time, and what we did was we used the RAID controller to rebuild the RAID rather than start all over. And that took, I think it took 15 hours for my 250 gigabyte hard drive. And the reason it takes so long is because it doesn't move the data that you have. Because I was under the impression, oh, my drive is not that full, it won't take that long to move everything, to copy everything, basically. But it doesn't copy files, it goes bit for bit, copies through the entire hard drive. And it also gives you the functionality to be in that hard drive while it's rebuilding. So I could still, you know, play games and surf the internet and use Skype while it's rebuilding. And that functionality makes it go a little slower as well. So once that drive was rebuilt, like I said, it took 15 hours. Then I was able to jump into Windows again and finally start installing all my stuff again. Install Steam, get all my games, install Battlefield, etc., install Vegas and Fraps and all of that. And so that was the second night that I was there, and I think I got it all done and ready to go around 8 a.m. and rather than sleep, I decided to play games, and I did. I played until about 3 p.m., which is kind of strange for me playing in the morning. I usually play very, very late at night, but it was great. We were able to find a server that that went mixed mode, Rush and Conquest, and we played that pretty much all night and went through the whole cycle. In fact, we started on Arica Rush defense, went through almost all of the maps in vanilla, and then came back and played Arica Rush defense, and in that cycle we did not lose one single game, which I was very happy about. So all in all, this build, it was definitely infuriating and frustrating. I think I installed Windows 5 different times. I think I changed my RAID twice, rebuilt the RAID twice, and I think I just have a shitty RAID controller, to be honest. It's not what I want to hear, it's not what I want to have happen, so I think that in the future I would get a hardware RAID controller, which doesn't use any software. It uses, I think it's a PCI Express slot that you can get for that. But anyway, it all works now, and I was able to play and record at higher frame rates than I was able to play at before without even recording. So it's just amazing. One thing that does change is I was running all low graphics before. Now running high graphics, it is a little difficult to spot people, since they are not, they don't stand out as well because the detail isn't as high. But in terms of the gameplay, what we were doing was we were being I'm sure a lot of you have seen Jay Kaiser's rush tactics, and he talks about the annoying defender, and that's kind of what I've tried to apply to Conquest. Our uncap is on the A side, and so what me and my squad are doing is we're spending all of our time on the C side, and we are trying to keep as many enemies there as possible, effectively stopping them from pushing to B. And it makes for it does two things. It helps our team when they are less than competent enough to hold them at B all the time, and it makes for really exciting gameplay because they are spawning at B and we are trying to hold B at the same time. Now these guys weren't as you could tell from the gameplay that you have been watching, these guys weren't the greatest, and I was able to flank and destroy pretty much, and it was a lot of fun. So that tactic is pretty much what I always use when I'm playing with these guys. I'm playing with Nikon Watcher and Crow 245 and two of my friends in real life, and we just like to be that hyper aggressive squad that kind of annoys them enough that they want to attack us rather than attacking flags. And that's a fairly good tactic in Conquest if you want to, if you are willing to take a lot of deaths, because it is something that is kind of hard to do and get a good KD unless you are just a beastly slayer, like some of you out there I know are. However, if you did notice in the beginning of the video, I spent a lot of my time at A. That is because they made a huge push, I think kind of like we did, to get to A and to hold A. However, I was able to sort of defend that by myself while Nikon and Crow were at C. And so after I was able to clean up A, then we went to C, and once all three of us were at C, then they got triple capped pretty quickly. Kudos to them though, they did push. They did not all turn bushwookie and start sniping, and they came through these rocks. They came down brick lane from single construction. They went beachside rocks to the lower red brick. They were pushing hard, so kudos to them, but in the end they did lose, and we pulled off the win. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and please leave comments and let me know what you think about this video or what you want to see coming up. And I do have a few ideas for future videos, but I always want more comments from you guys. That's it for this. I went 49 and 17, so sorry for my technical rant, and I will see you all in game. All the best, guys.